The endless ribbon of blacktop stretched before him, illuminated only by the pale glow of his headlights. It was midnight, the witching hour, and the only sound was the low rumble of his rig eating up the miles. The air inside the cab was thick with the smell of stale coffee and truck stop sandwiches. Jack, a seasoned trucker with countless miles under his belt, felt the familiar loneliness of the open road pressing down on him. He reached out and idly adjusted the dial on his CB radio, hoping for a friendly voice to break the monotony of the night. He had been driving for hours, ever since his last stop in some dusty town he couldn't even remember the name of. The only company he had were the shadows that danced at the edge of his vision, cast by the passing streetlights. The further he drove, the more isolated he felt. The world outside his truck seemed to melt away, leaving him alone in a sea of darkness and asphalt. Static crackled through the speakers, momentarily jolting Jack from his thoughts. Just as quickly, it faded, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow louder than the static itself. He frowned, reaching out to adjust the dial again. But before his fingers could touch the knob, a voice, thin and raspy, cut through the silence. "Don't look in your mirrors." The voice, barely a whisper, seemed to come from right beside him, chilling him to the bone. It was close, intimate, as if it were spoken directly into his ear. "What the?" Jack muttered, his heart pounding in his chest. He glanced at the CB radio, but the display was dark. No lights, no signal, just the cold, blank stare of dead electronics. He tried to rationalize the voice, to chalk it up to fatigue or a trick of the wind, but deep down, a primal fear began to take root. It felt like a warning, one that sent shivers down his spine and made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. A sudden chill swept through the cabin, so intense that Jack could see his breath misting in the air. The temperature plummeted, the air growing thick and heavy, as if an unseen presence had entered the truck. He could feel the fine hairs on his arms stand on end. A cold sweat broke out on his skin. His senses were on high alert, every nerve ending screaming at him that something was terribly wrong. And then he saw it. A flicker of movement in the reflection of his rearview mirror. A shadow darker than the night itself, shifting in the back seat where no one should be. It was shapeless, formless, yet it seemed to writhe and pulsate with a malevolent energy that made his blood run cold. The voice, closer now, whispered again, each word a hammer blow to his sanity. "If you see him, it's already too late." The warning, laced with an undercurrent of menace, was all the push Jack needed. He couldn't help himself. His eyes darted up to the rearview mirror, his gaze drawn to the shadowy figure like a moth to a flame. The figure had solidified, taking on a grotesque parody of a human form. Its eyes, two glowing embers in the darkness, locked onto his with terrifying intensity. And then it smiled. The grin was wide, unnatural, revealing rows of jagged teeth that seemed to gleam in the darkness. Terror, raw and consuming, seized Jack's heart in a vice-like grip. His foot slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding dangerously on the deserted highway. The headlights flickered erratically, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the cab. Then with a final sputter, the engine died, plunging the world into absolute darkness. Silence descended, broken only by the frantic thump of Jack's heart, and then a whisper, barely audible, right behind his ear. "Hello, Jack." A hot, fetid breath, reeking of decay, washed over his neck. The last thing Jack felt was a cold, clammy hand closing around his throat.